Ajnanatiram dasya jnana jala shalakaya chakshurumenitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Ya kundendu tusharahara dhavala, Ya shubhravastravita, Ya vinavardanda manditakara, Ya shveta padmasana, Ya brahmachyuta shankara pritpitibhir, Devi sada vandita, Sama patu saraswati bhagavati, Buddhi pradam sharane. Buddhi Pradam Sharare. Jai Gurudev, everybody.
Jai Gurudev.
Guruji and Swami Sridhar and Rishi Chidananda, they might be joining us. Here is Swamini Janani. She is the Swamini of California. Swami Sridhar here coming is the Swami of California. And here is Swamini Pratibha. She is the Swamini of Canada. So if you have any lovely questions, this is the time to ask any of them. They've all been on the spiritual path and with Guruji for a very long time. So gaining their wisdom will be very lovely. And just because there's so many speakers, to make it easy for everybody, I'll MC. Okay? Jai Gurudev. So, any lovely questions? Yes, Hemavati. Jai Gurudev. So her question was, how do we balance between effort and flow? Actually, I think this is perfect for our surfing Swami, so I'm just going to hand it off to Swami Sridhar.
Jai Gurudev. Actually, I got a little excited there because effort and flow, you know, and there's definitely flow in life. And Guruji also talks about divine flow, to be in tune with your divine flow. And I don't know, what that means to me is to be in tune with your relationship with your Creator, with Bhagavan, with Guruji. So in the ocean, when you approach the ocean, the waves of the ocean, the flow of the ocean, do you approach the ocean like you can control it? No. And if you do, what happens? What can happen? The waves can pound you. The current can sweep you out. The rip current can sweep you down. You can end up in a hole. You can get pounded on a rock. You can get swept out to sea. You can get run over by another surfer. You can step on a sea ray, an urchin, a piece of coral. Like, you can't go into the ocean like you know what you're doing. But why do we go around the planet Earth on the ground thinking we can control everything? I'm saying, why do I? For me, it was 30 years of teaching surfing. 30,000 students. To understand, to continually get pounded by the sea, to help people learn how to go with the flow. One of the most important things is to breathe. You know, we learn in Amakriya Yoga, we learn from Guruji to breathe. breathe deeply, breathe consciously. That's what can allow us to relax. What's agitated? When we're experiencing agitated world, does it come from the world or does it come from us? One time, someone clearly asked Guruji, you mean when some challenge, obstacle, or person who seems to not like us comes to us, it's a result of our own projection? And Guruji said yes. Now for me, Guruji says so many things over the 9 years I've been with him where my mind has a huge hurdle to get over. How can my enemy be a result of my projection? I had one enemy once, a real enemy who I could qualify him as an enemy. And for 2 years, he was threatening to kill me in Hawaii and dump me in the trench between Molokai and Maui. For real, for real. I could tell you a long, long, beautiful story. But in the end, one day after 2 years of being persecuted by him, I couldn't get rid of him. I hated him. I yelled at him in the mirror. I yelled at him at home, not to his face, because he was intimidating. But one day I decided, wow, I haven't tried loving him yet. I tried loving him one night, and I realized after 6 months, I never saw him after that night. He was gone. So that's supported through experience, what Guruji taught about projection from my limitation. So how to find the flow, I think, is through the teachings of yoga, of breathing properly, of chanting the divine name. Those two things, combining them, those two things are what's going to calm your mind. And when we have a calm mind, we're not going to panic. We're not going to think we're in control so much. And then the flow can find us, and we can find the flow. Take your dad.
Thank you, Swami. Next question. Anybody, please just raise your hand. Except you. Sorry. Jacob Dave. Somebody else. Yes, Shash. Shash, please.
Is there a difference between having devotion and having faith? Can you have devotion without having faith, or vice versa?
Swamini Pratibha?
There's a big difference between devotion and faith. I think most of us grew up having faith that there was something bigger than ourselves, something phenomenal out there, and no idea what that was. And what I've experienced is when you finally have a physical presence in front of you, when you have the avatar in front of you, then that's when devotion hits. Because being devoted to an abstract concept is almost impossible. So to have faith in the world, faith in love, faith in God is a beautiful first step. But until you meet the Satguru, until you meet the master and physically have someone to look at, that's when devotion starts. And for a lot of us, we're eased into the idea of devotion by little bits of human love. We love our parents, or we have a first love. And it's good to experience that first love, because in my experience working with kids in prison, if you've never experienced human love, being told to love God is impossible, because they have no concept of what that feels like. So when you physically have someone in front of you to focus on, like the Satguru, and it may be hard to love him at first, especially if you've come from a battered background, or a background of not knowing what love is, or love is abuse, love is someone leaving you. So you move past love to devotion, and just hanging on to that concept, I'm going to be devoted, I'm going to do whatever he asks, I'm going to be of service. And then that catapults you into a higher faith. And it's faith with foundation, finally. Because you've gone past the abstract faith to having a personal relationship with God and knowing He's going to take care of you. And in my experience, being devoted to Guruji, and then, I first met him when I was caring for my mother, so I was living with her. And then she passed away, and Guruji just sent me back out into Canada. And I was devoted to him, and so I was just clinging on to faith that he promised to protect me, he promised to look after me because I had devoted myself to him. And I've been living in mansions and on yachts and living a bigger life than I ever lived when I was a working class schmuck. And so that's where devotion has finally become hand in hand with faith.
Thank you, Swami. Next question. Nish, you had a question yesterday that was not answered.
The phrase "just love," it sounds so simple, right? But at the same time, it defines everything that we do. And so, just going deeper into just love, right? And then what does that really mean? How can we take the next step, right? Just love.
So to repeat for everybody in the back, Nish Kaladasananda asked, we often say, or Guruji says, just love, and it seems superficial, but it is much deeper than that. So how do we go deeper into just love? Swamini Janani?
Oh, thanks for asking that question. When I first met Guruji 16 years ago, is that good? Hold it? So 16 years ago, I met Guruji. But I met Guruji in my dreams when he was 10. I didn't know what that was. I knew he was a God man in the dreams. And I asked him, "Who are you?" And he just floated up a hill with a big eagle on his back. And I was between homes. And so I trusted that it was kind of like a prophecy. I had lots of faith, just like Swami Pratibha says. I was raised in a Sicilian, very Catholic home. So Jesus, Mary, the angels, the saints, they were all my friends. But I had this dream when I was between homes. And I thought, well, this is not Jesus, it's not Mary, and there's a bird. What is this? So I knew where he was in the dream. And I went up the hill the next day. I was still a student. I was at UCI in California. I was dancing and taking all kinds of history courses at the university at the time. And I went up the hill to find a home, and there was a home for sale with a beautiful view, and there was the hill that I saw in the dream. So we wrote an offer on that house. I felt very comfortable, full price. We didn't get it because the market in California is very crazy. It's either feast or famine, and there were 6 offers. Mine was not the highest. So I went home, was a little disappointed, but not devastated. I had a lot of love in my heart. Just love. What is just love? So I had another dream the next night, believe it or not. And this dream shows me of a rock. And on this rock is a seal. Well, a seal is like a Sangha group. It is a group of seals, all barking on a rock. So I wasn't a realtor at the time. I asked the realtor, are there any homes in this neighborhood where there is a seal on a rock. Yes, 3 homes. So we looked at all 3, and we found and purchased one, full price again, but there were no offers because the house had never really been lived in, and it was with a beautiful view of that rock. Okay, that was then, a long time ago. Then comes 2006, right? And I heard, I was a Kali devotee in those days, and I heard there was a saint coming from Mauritius, a beautiful young man who manifested things like, what does that mean? I didn't know what that meant. So someone said, you should go. And I thought, sure, why not? I've seen all the Indian saints who have come. Some told me I was crazy. Some laughed at me. Some made my car not work on a very 110-day heat wave. And I'm like, I have to go and see this young saint. So I went. And there was a Sangha group, and they were all sitting at a table, this big, hotel. There were shoes everywhere. And I said, is this where this Swami is going to speak? Yes. Wait here. So, okay, so I backed up, and I had a young man with me, not so young, a man, a guy with me. And I had my arms all full of presents, things for him, for the man who told me, who was my teacher at the time. And this beautiful man appears, not quite in the doorway like Narasimha where he killed, but just before you come through the doorway. And I saw this beautiful man, and he was huge. Well, to me, he was huge because, I'm not so huge. And I was even smaller then. And he had this long hair and this long robe and a shawl. And everything was trailing except the bird. Remember the dream, the bird. And his hair was partially covered. And I looked at him, and in my mind, I said, Jesus Christ. And he turned his head and said, just a minute. I'm like, oh. He's looking at me like that. So I was like shocked. Just stood there. I didn't even know there was a man next to me. I didn't know there were shoes. I didn't know there were people milling about. I was in shock. My heart, didn't even beat. I wasn't frightened. I just looked. And he came up to me with a focus. I've never seen a focus like this before. Usually you see somebody and go, oh, hi, John, how, James? Hello, hello. No, like the candle. No flicker. Shh, straight to me. And I just went, hello. I said, hello. And he goes, hello. Are you Indian? No, I'm Sicilian. Oh, you look like Grandma. My grandma. I'm like, your grandma? Really? Honestly, this was a long time ago, 16 years ago, right? I did not look like his grandma. But, later on, when all of his family met me, they went, oh my God, she looks like Mom. Anyhow, getting back to just love. I gave him, he wants everything in my arms. I have flowers, I have poetry, I have food, I have everything you can imagine. If you know me, you know who I am. If you don't know me, you should get to know me. I'm kind of fun. Anyhow, he said, is that all for me? I went, well, no, it's not for you. No, I'm meeting somebody here. Oh, I'll see you later. He said, are you coming for Darshan? I said, well, yeah, that's why I'm here. And I'm absolutely talking to him like he is, I know him, but he's a stranger to me. Anyway, he says, let me take everything from you. And so, okay, I grudgingly, this is for you, this is for him, this is for you, this is for him. Okay. And I came back. Then I found out there was a beautiful Darshan, and he sees me, and he says, you're not old. It's the look. You have the look of my grandmother. And, later on he told me it was my eyes. So I also understood there were personal interviews, and you could ask questions like you're asking this question of me. Well, what do I ask him? At the time, I had a tantric teacher, and if Parantapai was here, he'd be on the floor laughing. But the tantric teacher did this enormous initiation on me and then never talked to me again. And I was like, what happened? What happened? He worshipped me like Sharada Devi was worshipped. Okay. So I thought, okay, perfect. I'm going to ask him this question. Why doesn't the tantric teacher talk to me anymore? What do I know? I don't have any knowledge. I don't have knowledge. Yes, I've been to the university. Yes, I've been working. Yes, I have 3 sons. Yes, I have grandchildren. I have no knowledge. None. And knowledge to me is keen. I was a philosophy major. No knowledge. So I go, take my interview, and I get lost. I leave at 9 o'clock in the morning, go out to Palm Springs, which is like a 2-hour drive. I arrive at 3 o'clock, and I'm wearing a cute little sari and another basket full of gifts for him. An artichoke, maybe a pineapple, a papaya, poetry, other stuff that I have. I was a Kali Mandir type person, Kali devotee, told him about this temple. So he says to me, so what's your question? Mine's blank. Absolutely blank. Question? He goes, yeah, what's your question? My mind was so blank. And what did I do? I started to cry in front of this perfect person I know, but who is a stranger. I have crocodile tears coming down my face. What's this all about? And what does he do? This perfect person that I know, who's a perfect stranger, he wipes my tears. And I said to him, he picked up down here, he picks up my chin. And he says, what is it? And I said, just love God. I just love God. And he looked at me and he said, that's all there is. Just love. Just love. Then he did patty cake with my hand, where he did some kind of something with my hands. I didn't know what he was doing. No knowledge. But I understood. Just love. It's like faith, trust, hope, service. Faith, hope, charity. Service. Just love. And that's it. It's very simple, but it's not easy. But it's very simple. Patience, knowing he's with you all the time. All the time. He knows everything. The ups, the ins, the outs, the downs. He knows it all. The COVID problems, the moving problems. Look how he helped me with houses. He helped me again with houses, most recently, last few years.
Jager Swami. Sorry.
Sorry, that's it. Just love.
I just want that everyone can give satsang. Thank you very much. Next question. I mean, I mean, Nish can ask another question, but yes, Aravinda Dasi. Sorry, I'm going to repeat because I don't think I heard. Was the question, what's the line between observing and judging? Yeah, for those at home, because it's being live streamed, the question is there a line between observing and judging? And when does observing become judging? Rishiji?
So when the Mahabharata war was happening, and we're looking at this war, we see that Krishna asks Arjuna to kill all of the soldiers on the other side. So a lot of times when people ask me about this particular event, they say, well, Hinduism is about peacefulness. It's about ahimsa, not harming. Why would Krishna ask to do something so crazy, right? And so for us, it's easy. We know that the Mahabharata was what is referred to as a Dharma Yuddha, which is a righteous war. And how do we know that it was a righteous war? Because Krishna tells us, right? So Krishna is the one that determines what is right and what is wrong in our eyes. So even in judgment, sometimes when we look at a particular situation, we approach it from the consciousness that we have. And sometimes at a lower consciousness, we might not understand an event that's happening at a much higher perspective, right? For example, why is Guruji on his phone doing a puja? Or why is he doing this during an event? Why is he acting in this way? Why was he mean to me? 99% of people in this world are going to look at that and judge. Only a very, very, very handful of people are able to perceive that particular situation in any other way but judgment. And that's actually one of the main reasons why there's only 50 people here. Because most of the world, when they see a true master, cannot understand his actions. Because our consciousness is not high enough to understand. If people understood it, there'd be a line, 1 million people waiting in line to meet him. If they understood how great he is. And so the first thing we have to evaluate is to understand, is that judgment, where is that judgment coming from? Which level of consciousness? Because from one perspective it could seem right, and from another perspective it could seem wrong. So a lot of times, for me personally, the way that I differentiate between a judgment and between something, let's say, that's adharma, and how do I act if I see something negative happening, it's just the emotion. Right? So if I feel anger, if I feel frustration, if I feel like I'm in my mind, then of course it's something that there's an attachment. But if I see something adharmic happening and the reaction naturally flows without overthinking, then I understand that that is something that is coming from something deeper than me. But this question is not something that's just, I wake up one day and I understand. It's a lifelong process to be able to discriminate between judgment and adharma. Because look at Jesus Christ. When he went into the temple, what did he do? He became angry and he flipped the temple, or he flipped the table. What did Narasimha do? He took a human being, put it on him, put it on his lap, and tore out his intestines. And so who's to say that is right or that's wrong? We say that's right because it comes from God. And so it's a lifelong process to understand what is the will of the divine and what is our dharma. And so I'm purposely giving you an ambiguous answer because that is something that is not black and white. It is different for each single person. So the more and more you go into your meditations, the more and more you do your practices, you'll be able to discriminate better between judgment and adharma and action and non-action. Because a lot of the times, sometimes it's called upon us to act when we see something negative happening. And sometimes it's called upon us to not act. But that's not easy, because in every situation it's different. So if I'm an activist on the streets of New York City and I see that something is happening, maybe I go for a march, right? Maybe I see that there's something happening, I'm saying, okay, let's go for a march. And for that person, that is good. But for a monk, that's not appropriate, right? So even there's a difference between what is right action. And so the only way to understand that for yourself is to go deeper into your spiritual practices. The more and more you connect with Guruji, the more and more you connect with the will of the divine. And the will of the divine will guide you in whether or not you should take an action or you should not. So ultimately, everything comes down to being in tune with the will of the divine, being in tune with Guruji. When you're able to do that, then you will understand if it is something that is a judgment or if it's something that you should act on. So,
Please. Please, please. Thank you, Rishi.
Thank you, Rishi. Just to act on what I'm inspired from listening to him and also contemplating your question, it's a really good question. And I think that in your mind, in our mind, in my mind, I could have a conversation about distinguishing that difference the rest of my life. But where should our attention be is Krishna's teaching, where Guruji's teaching. Like our attention should be internally focused, like underneath all of the mind's activities. So observing comes from the two eyes. And if our attention's in our two eyes, then our observing's outside. And if our attention's outside, then we know that those emotions that go with the observations further exemplify that we're in our limitation and in our mind. So I think that that's a good question, but it poses a deeper question of the direction of our attention and the practice of our attention, the sadhana of the direction of our attention. So one thing I remember early on from Guruji, my second most important lesson was when you're in judgment, you're in your mind. So it was really simple because the first lesson was there's no more important pilgrimage than the 40 centimeters from your mind to your heart. So awareness comes from attention. So if attention's on the third eye, the inner direction, then the question you ask is up there on the surface of the ocean where all the bumps on the surface are. But your attention's deep. And that's where your divine flow is, to come back to you. Okay, that's all. I just want to add.
Thank you, Swami. Next question. Chandran Kiridas.
This was sparked by something Rishi just said that I could almost ask Guruji, and he got in and I got too nervous. So I was going to ask, we know that it said that nothing, not even a leaf can move when God does not will it. So his will is supreme in all activities. Krishna also tells us in Bhagavad Gita that when adharma outweighs dharma, he will incarnate to restore that balance. So I guess the question is, where does this adharma come from? What force other than God's will can give rise to this adharma?
Chandran Kiridas had a very good question. The question was, we're told that everything is the Lord's will, But at the same time, we're also told that the Lord will incarnate when adharma outweighs dharma. So where does adharma come from if everything is the Lord's will? It's a very good question. Anybody would like to take it? Swamini? Yes. Oh. There's the answer. Swamini?
Oops. The sort of real world visual that always comes to me when a question like that comes up is when I first met Guruji and he sat me next to him and allowed me to ask him anything I wanted. I asked him if Mataji ever comes out, referring to Mahavatar Babaji's sister. And he looked at me and he said, no, she stays in Varanasi. And then it was like the whole energy of the room changed. And he said, you know, there are immortals older than Babaji. And I immediately remembered this book that was in a hut I was living in alone. I was in an abandoned hut in South India, and this one book was on the floor. And I didn't have a cell phone or a computer or anything, so I read the book. And it was about the Saptarishis. So I said to Guruji, you mean the Saptarishis? And he went, yes. And I said, it's my understanding they've written everything that's to happen, and we just have to play our parts. Yes! And my hair stood up. And I realized that the Saptarishis, the 7 immortals who are in charge of our reality, have written a screenplay. Like, this is my background, is film. They've written a screenplay, and I said to him, we just have to play our parts. And he said yes. And when the actors you've hired don't play their parts, a dharma happens. So this beautiful creation has been written. When you tune into it, when you align with divine will through your guru, through teachings, then you've read the screenplay and the director's off to the side and you're doing exactly what he tells you to do, and as a result there's a beautiful movie happening. When you get actors spontaneously doing whatever they want on stage, ignoring the script, ignoring the director, it's chaos. And so he says, Krishna says, when a dharma happens, I come back, I reincarnate. So meaning the director has to walk on stage and go, stop, cut, hold it. You're all wrong. Let's start again. And that has kept me on track so much, because whenever I think I can spontaneously wing it, I remember there's a script that's to be followed. The guru has told us how to follow it, how to behave, what to do. And as long as you follow that, miracles happen. So that's my experience of that event, that it has all been written, and we're fools to think that anything is just happening spontaneously.
So Guruji said that the answer directly to your question of where does a dharma come from, if all of you looked it up already, chapter 15, verse 15, I am seated in the hearts of all living beings, and from me comes memory, knowledge, as well as forgetfulness. So the direct answer to your question of where does a dharma come from, comes from him. Thanks. Next question. Anupama, do you have a question? Oh, so Rishi will speak, but just to repeat for the live stream, Anuprabha's question was, she acknowledges that there should be millions here to see Guruji, but there's only few, and sometimes it feels difficult. We try very hard to spread the message of Guruji, to have people come meet him, but yet they don't. So what to do?
So first thing I would say is Krishna, as we know, says in the Bhagavad Gita, 1 in a million, in a million, in a million will get to know me. Right, so that's the first thing. To have bhakti, to have devotion, that is thousands and thousands and thousands of years of penance, just to be able to love the Lord. So right, somebody asked the difference between faith and devotion. Sure, we have faith in this world, because tomorrow we all think we're going to wake up and go on with our lives, right? So there's faith that tomorrow we're going to wake up. There was just to divert, there was a beautiful story where Yudhishthira, who is the king of the Pandavas, is with his brother Bhima. And Yudhishthira had a tendency to invite people and give them advice. So one day a man came and asked Yudhishthira for advice, and he said, I don't have time today, but come back tomorrow. So Bhima is listening, the brother is listening. And he's thinking, and he's like, oh, okay. And the next day he throws a huge party for Yudhishthira. Balloons, birthday cake, everything. So Yudhishthira walks in and he's like, brother, why do you have this big party? And Bhima's like, oh, I wanted to celebrate. And he's like, what do you want to celebrate? He's like, because my brother has become so great that he knows what tomorrow holds. So I wanted to celebrate this moment because he's reached such a high level of realization. So in this way, we all have faith in something or another. But to have faith in Krishna, to have faith in the Guru, that takes thousands of years, if you're lucky. Right? So that's one thing to understand. The second thing to understand, in my humble opinion, is that a lot of the times, I've noticed this in myself. When I first came to the United States, I was trying to preach and do this and do that. And, maybe I was doing this or that, whatever. And Guruji looked at me, or he called me and he said, this is the problem with all of you. You all want to do something to please me. You all want to do something to show me how great you are. But when was the last time that you worked with the community? When was the last time you worked with the Swamis? When was the last time you had a meeting with them and came together? Right? So we have to also understand where we are coming from when we do these things. Because you can be the greatest narrator, you can memorize the Bhagavad Gita left and right, you can do everything. But if you are not working within the community that the Guru has set up, you will not be able to bring a single person. He told me whatever you can accomplish is not even a shadow of a toenail of what can be done with my grace. Not even a shadow of a toenail. So when I am not bringing people to Guruji, I have to ask myself, where is my sincerity? Why am I doing it? How am I doing it? Because the greatest thing I ever heard is the Sangha is a Murti. Right? This is a Murti. The Guru is a Murti. But we forget that the Sangha, the community, is a Murti. And if we disregard the community, we are disregarding the Murti. And there is no grace that flows. But when we work together, and we are willing to let go of our own ego, I'm telling you, miracles can happen. It's been such a pleasure to work with Swami Tulsidas and Swami Sridhar and Swami Janani. It is so beautiful when we are able to work together. Because one of the things that I've realized is a lot of the times we want to do things for ourselves so we can be great in front of Guruji's eyes. But when was the last time we uplifted somebody else to be great in front of Guruji's eyes? because it's paradoxical. We think if we help somebody or uplift somebody, that's saying less about us. But in my opinion, all of the times when I've tried to uplift my brothers and sisters, people come. They gravitate towards the community. You know, a lot of times I was doing certain things in New York City. I was talking with them for years and years. They didn't change, they didn't transform. And I said, you know what, you have to come and meet Swami Tulsidas. They came and they were like, oh my God, the Sangha is amazing. I want to come and meet Guruji. When is he coming? And they're coming to Elmira. So I would say if you want to let the grace of the Guru flow and you want to reach people, it's not about reading the Bhagavad Gita and doing this and that. You can do a million of those things, and all of those are important. But if you're able to work within the Sangha and uplift your brothers and sisters and make the Sangha a murti, you will see, in my opinion, you will reach so many people. So this is my humble.
Swami Tulsidas, can I add to that? Jai Gurudev. So I live in a different kind of community now, and I kind of live in a village. And I'm very positive. I don't know if any of you know that. I'm just a positive person, and I smile and laugh a lot. And I didn't know how to reach any of these people. So one day I was at the mailboxes, and I saw this beautiful man. He was delivering groceries to his mother, who lives in this building. I said, what are you doing? And he told me. I said, oh, I'd like to do that. I would like to help others also who can't get out. So I go once a week. I go to, actually it's a church. It's a Christian church. I listen sometimes to the pastors and beautiful music. And then there's a food bank. And you get a huge basket of food, huge. And I pack it all up in my car. And I have a granny cart, which is one of those push carts. And I fill it up with food. And I've met people this way. I go knocking at their doors. I know where they live. I took their name and their room number. I go from, those 4 floors, 2 buildings, and I go to these people, ring their bell, ding, 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 and they open it. And they're just so ecstatic. They get vegetables, they get fruits, they get breads, they get milk. They're just so happy. And so they ask me, why are you doing this? Why do you do this? Even some of the devotees ask me, you're crazy. You're wearing yourself out. I'm not. It gives me so much love to see these people so happy. Why do I do it? Because I'm serving Guruji by serving them. A lot of them have no cars. A lot of them have knee problems or shoulder problems, whatever problems. But they're so happy. They answer the door for their bread, their milk, their vegetables, their fruit. And I'm just so grateful that I can do this for them. So when they see me now, I'm the food girl. I go like this to them. I don't say Jai Gurudev to them. I say, God bless you. And everybody understands that. And I just put my hand on my heart and bow my head. And they're so happy to see me. And that's God's work, feeding people. You don't have to you have to feed the body. Then you feed first the heart, then the body, and then the spirit. And that's how I do some of my work. Check it out.
So maybe I can add a little, hopefully. So Anuprada, you're a flight attendant and you meet a lot of people. And just thinking about your question, like how to inspire these people to get in that line out the door to meet Guruji, and so important, like Swamini's saying, her outreach. and Rishi's talking about what do they encounter from that spark of outreach. And it takes me to Just Love Festival this year and every year. When Guruji finishes and he gives his final satsang, he generally says, take this love and reflect it wherever you go. Give that guru a mic, please. Take that love and reflect it wherever you go. Do we reflect love from where? Do we think love? So we don't reflect it from our minds. So he said, essentially, maybe go as you go out in the world, stay in your heart. That's how he can work through us. Because our perception of sparking someone to get in that 1,000,000-person line, which I don't know, does anybody not want that for the world and for all our friends and all the people we meet? Who can do it better? Our perception from our ideas, which come from our minds, which are, as Guruji teaches, limited, or if we come from this spontaneous reflection in that moment, where we're in the moment, because we reflect when we're present. And then he can work through you in any place and any situation, in my opinion. Anywhere. In a gas station with an attendant when you're just paying for the gas, it could happen there. It can happen at an airport, at a coffee bar, when a young man walks up and says, "Hey, do you know where to get a SIM card?" That's Govinda sitting here. I was at the coffee bar having a coffee. I wasn't trying to find a devotee of Guruji's per se, but Guruji, it was effortless because I wasn't trying, I wasn't trying my own effort. So if there's a way, and there is, by doing our sadhanas. I'll tell you, one of the most favorite things that I've heard Guruji say for me in the last 2 months, it's like 2 months ago, was about expectations. And he said, someone asked him, how can we learn to love like you? And he said, well, first of all, I don't expect anything from anyone. And I'm like, wow. So I myself said, okay, I'm going to make that a sadhana. The sadhana of no expectations, right? But expectations, what do they do? For me, they limit me. They keep me finite. And then my capacity to reflect him bright enough to spark somebody to come is diminished. So letting him work through you by staying out of the way and by remembering him and doing all the practices. And then considering what Rishiji was talking about. Like, what do they encounter? Like a lot, when he was talking to at least the Americans, and I think Canada should team up. Like, who cares if there's a line drawn between our two countries? The government might care. Do we care? Does God care? Does Guruji care? No, I don't think so. So when we have each other's backs and we try and lift each other up, as opposed to try and look good ourselves and look for that praise from Guruji or whatever, which I'm sure I fall prey to that all the time in my past. And I'm trying to move past that, like the sadhana of no expectations. And then in a garden, for example, when you water your flowers, do you get mad when the flower doesn't come yet? You like understand the flower will come when it comes, but what do you do? What's your job? Water the roots. It's karma yoga. Water the root, not the fruit. So we just keep watering the root, serving that divine love that we know is in everyone. So I guess I'm just saying that keep watering the fruit of the chances out there, and don't let our own minds limit how he can work through us, because he's unlimited, so he can spark them. And then let's keep nourishing our sangha, so when they do encounter us, they want to come back. And ultimately, we can bring that 1 million person line out the door. Jai Gurudev.
This is a lovely discussion because there are so many facets to it. And to give you an example that actually bounces off a couple of previous questions about not judging, just observing a situation and not trying to put our expectations on it, to not expect anything. And recently, back in the foothills of Calgary, where I am, I ordered some vitamins online. And I was immediately sent an email saying, yes, your order's been processed and we've charged you $250 for a tiny bottle of vitamins that was advertised as 30. And so at first I'm like, this doesn't happen to me. I'm a good person. I have good karma. There's no reason why this should happen. But no matter how I tried to fix that, I phoned the bank couldn't access my account. I tried to do it online and the internet shut down. And I realized I would have to physically go to the bank, which I haven't done in years. And the whole time I'm kind of moaning and wailing, and why is this happening to me? I have better things to do. So I had to get a neighbor to drive me because I don't own anything. Drove me to the bank, they processed things, and I had to go into a special office for fraud. And I walked in, and this woman was barely hanging on for dear life. She was very professional. She processed the claim. And then she said, can I ask you about this and the orange? And so I told her, I'm a Vaishnava. The orange means I'm available to anybody for free anywhere. And she burst into tears. And she said, my whole world is collapsing. I think God sent you. And so she shut the door and we talked for an hour. The money was refunded before I walked out of the office. They said it would take weeks. The money was back in my account immediately. So obviously, Guruji just needed to create the impetus to get me to that obscure place. I never would have walked into that bank office for any reason. And yet here I was. She unraveled. We talked about life and about karma and forgiveness, and I gave her my card, and now she's chanting. She's attending everything. So I think because we're such a young organization, we have to understand that it's one flower at a time to make this bouquet. It's not at the stage where we can do this mass rollout and get 1 million people. We literally are being sent by Guruji to one person at a time. So always be aware, always stay open. When we were filling up with gas just 2 days ago, the young man looked in, saw Malik as Krishna, and lost his mind. He was here from India. He'd been looking for Krishna. He couldn't find him anywhere. I gave him my card. Within 10 minutes, he had messaged me. I sent him the poster. He's coming to Darshan. So these souls are out there, and Guruji knows where they are, and that's why he's got me theoretically in the middle of nowhere. And yet, every time I turn the corner, there's another person who very gently says, can I ask you what this means? And that's one of Guruji's souls who is just waiting for us to find them. So, Jai Gurudev.
One more question? Alexei. So the question is, just to repeat for those at home, is there choice or is it an illusion of choice? Swami?
I'll just give a quick one and then maybe you can elaborate. When in Lanzarote, someone asked Guruji if we have free will. And I guess that's like free choice. He said, well, you have the appearance of free will. But no.
Leave it at that.
Hi, Baljager Dave. Thank you all very much. The next event will be, where is Sairam? Not around. Okay then.
The next event, Darshan. The next event is the next event is Saturday Darshan, downtown at the Marriott, and it's tentatively scheduled 2 to 4. And as you know, with Darshan, we've got leeway either way, but it's a beautiful location, and you can get to it with public transit. So you might even prefer that because parking downtown can be expensive, but we're looking forward to a beautiful event. And then the following day is here, the inauguration of the Radharani Temple, which is one of the rarest in the world. So looking forward to seeing you all.
Thank you very much, Swami. All right, so we'll see you all at Darshan, and then the inauguration the day after. All right, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Om Shanti 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 Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Paramahamsa Sat Gurudev Swami Vishwananda Mahaprabhu Ki Jai.